chickens here a little snack. There you go, sweetie. What we got here is some oats, some whey, and yogurt, homemade that we made ourselves, as well as some eggshells for calcium, and some raisins to give them a little treat. I'll let them finish that there. So one of the reasons why we decided to do the channel is because there was a niche that we couldn't find for ourselves when we went onto YouTube. I guess everywhere you look, magazines, books, YouTube, Instagram, Pinterest, tons of people in our feed who were doing things that we like to do, but in a different location. And what I mean by that is they're in southern or western climates where it's much warmer than it is here up north. Or they moved on from homesteading on a small property to living their dream, quitting their job and living on plenty of acres, raising livestock, as well as growing food on a large scale. And the niche that I'm talking about is growing in typical city yard, small spaces, but providing some type of food for yourself in a self-sufficient manner, specifically again up north in some of the colder zones. So that's kind of what we were looking to be able to do here on the channel. And maybe that's something that you can do for me. Hit us up, do me a favor, hit us up in the comments, since this is a new channel, and tell us what it is that you've been looking for on YouTube that you haven't been able to quite find, and maybe that's a video idea that we'd be able to do in the future. Love to chat it up with you, so tell us where you live, what kind of what zone that you're in, and what type of climates that you're dealing with. What are some of the things that you'd like to do? Maybe it's something that we've encountered, maybe it's a problem that you have, and then we quite possibly might come up with a solution together. So we'll meet you down there in the comments. Look forward to talking to you there. Let's move on to the next spot of the homestead. Excuse me. Look out. Come on. Move out the way. Just a couple eggs that I didn't get this morning. So, speaking of chickens and being in a cold climate, if you didn't know, they're pretty cold hardy. So, like I said before, it's only 19 degrees. Earlier this morning I picked up about 4 eggs and have another 2 here. Cold really hasn't affected the girls at all, and that's one of the things that we'll talk about in future videos. Proper planning and organization, research, you can actually do some things that you may not have thought were possible before. So if you get the right breeds that are actually cold hardy or cold tolerant, they have access to food and water and a house like this, a hen house, protects them from wind and keeps them dry. They're able to keep their body temperature up enough to do the things that they do, which is eat, lay eggs, and make manure. That's going to be good for the garden to grow our food. Let me pull up my notes here. There's something else that I wanted to bring up. Shh. Really curious today. Oh, so some of the things that we've been able to do in Zone 6A, we've been able to grow a modest amount of fruit, vegetables, herbs, and of course, fresh eggs, and all in a short, challenging growing season. In fact, there's a few new endeavors that we're going to introduce to the property this summer, so it was a perfect time to start the channel where we can kind of share our journey, showing you something new as well as learning a few new things ourselves. Just if you haven't already explored gardening and living a self-sufficient lifestyle, you should really stop and take a moment and think about the ability to produce a significant amount of things that you were buying from somebody else. Things that are nutritious, fresh, you know where they came from, being able to share them with friends and family. And we're not just talking about things that you eat. It can be something like beauty, hair, skin products, herbs that can act as a medicinal aid, things like that will make, I think will really improve your quality of life. We're gonna have to move to another spot because they're kind of upset that I'm in their space. So let's move to another part of the homestead so we can talk there. All right, so we're inside now. Let's talk about canning. We decided to primarily can a lot of the food that we grew or purchased over the summer for a few different reasons. Number one, the equipment needed to do so initially isn't very expensive. In fact, you may even inherit it from a family member, purchase some used, but even if you have to go out and purchase it new, compared to some other methods of preserving your food, it can be relatively inexpensive. You can also, it also serves a dual purpose. For instance, these jars can obviously be used in a pressure canner, but you can also take some of the dry goods in your pantry, like these beans or these peppers here, and they can be used vacuum sealed. And that's another method of being able to use those same jars that you would can with. And then of course, everyone knows in their household, I'm sure you have mason jars to drink beverages out of, so they can be used for that. And we've also found it helpful to use them for leftovers. So if you want to gradually get off of using plastic containers where you lose the lid, or they stain, or they retain some foul odor from the food that you heat up in a microwave before, glass is a good option, and having the dual purpose of the mason jars, or multiple purpose of the mason jar is a good option. Now, freezing works well, of course, if you want to do that. One of the cons to freezing is that everything has to be centrally located within that appliance, and the electric has to stay constant. So if you're in a colder climate, again in the Northeast where we live, during the winter we're more prone to lose power during snow and ice or windstorms. And of course, during the winter is when we would need those items that are stocked in the freezer the most. So canning things and keeping them shelf stable without the need of electricity turned out to be a better option for us, and it might work out for you as well. So that's another thing that we'll bullet point and say that that's something that we'll discuss in future videos on how to can some of the food that you've been able to grow. Now, you're probably asking yourself, well, what is there to do during the winter? Do you just take the several months off and do nothing? Of course not. There's plenty of things that will keep you busy. You do need to take time to kind of relax and recharge your batteries, kind of rest up from the frantic pace of those 6 to 8 months of growing and harvesting. So that's a good thing, just to do that physically and mentally. But then you have to take advantage of the downtime to design, plan, build, purchase, even repair some of the structures or equipment that you used last season or that you would like to use for the next season. And that's something that you can only do during the off season, because once you get your plants in the ground and things start growing, the pace at which everything moves really doesn't allow you to spend time keeping up with some of those things that I just mentioned. Now, we've also found it helpful to keep a journal and just simply writing down the things that you've planted, where they are, when you expect them to mature, when you would expect them to harvest, your frost dates, things like that. Having the journal does a couple things for you. Number one, it's going to be a reminder for what was successful. So at the end of the year, you can write down what you enjoyed growing, what was successful for you in your year, and you can also write down what were failures. You can keep track of pests, as well as diseases that you encountered, what you did to fight against them, how you lost those battles, And again, use that downtime in the off season to kind of combat that and make your improvements for the following season. And you'll be surprised at how many things you'll tell yourself that you will remember and you really won't. So keeping a journal year after year will kind of show you your progress, and it's also encouraging to look back in years past to see where you were and how you've grown. So that's something else that'll work to your advantage in the off season if you have one. So here's one of the things before we go I wanted to show you. Like, so in addition to some of the things that are on the shelf behind me that we were able to preserve, we also have the eggs. And the different colors have no bearing on the nutrition or how they taste, but they certainly help on the presentation. So this is another thing that we talked about in the beginning: planning, preparation. So when looking at getting your flock of chickens, each breed has certain characteristics as far as how many eggs they'll lay throughout the year, how large they'll be, what color they are, maybe even when it's certain personalities, where they decide to lay their eggs. In fact, you'll probably see some video of one of our chickens decide to lay, she lays her eggs in the dust bath every morning. So that's just something to consider. But that's some of the wonderful perks that you'll have in growing your own food. And because they are pretty shelf stable, that's something that you're able to leave at room temperature just as they are, of course washing them before using them. And you're also able to purchase or recycle egg cartons as well to give out to gifts to friends and family. So that's all I've got for the first video. We'll look forward to chatting it up in the comments below. Like I said, any questions, suggestions that you might have, or ideas on future videos, we look forward to hearing from you. And I'm going to turn it over to our video editor to kind of roll some of the footage of things that we did last summer. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, peace.